Recently, there's been a lot of speculation about the Winnower becoming a future raid or campaign boss, only deepening with the story revelations in Monument of Triumph. I understand the allure of the Winnower. The lore sets it up as the ultimate evil in the Destiny universe. It's one of the gods that creates the universe via the Flower Game, and becomes one of its laws in the darkness, power to take, and the final shape. However, I would be careful what you wish for because a fight against the Winnower might be unwinnable. You might balk at this suggestion, but it's grounded very deeply in the nature of the god itself. To understand why requires examining the Winnower's history, the fated conflict at the end of time, and the ramifications of killing a law of the universe. The Winnower first appears in the Books of Sorrow as an unnamed voice that Oryx communes with when he gains the power to create Taken. In Battle-Made Waves, Oryx summons this voice into the body of an unborn ogre. The end of the entry describes the speaker as the Deep itself. Given that the Deep is the way the Hive refer to paracausal darkness, the force opposite the Traveler's paracausal light, we can conclude that the speaker is a manifestation of the darkness itself. This voice speaks to Oryx in the next entry, Majestic Majestic, explaining its ideology, the final shape, that all life must prove it has the right to exist by continuing to exist. Survival must be attained at any cost, including violence. The Deep itself calls this idea majestic and ends by saying, "It is what I am." This implies that the speaker isn't only the darkness, but the final shape as well, an ideology manifested as a conscious god with immense power over the universe. Until Shadowkeep, the speaker remained nameless. However, after the events of the campaign, Eris acquires the mysterious darkness artifact in the Lunar Pyramid, which gives her the power of stasis, an aspect of the darkness. This artifact eventually begins whispering to Eris, which she transcribes, creating the Unveiling lore book. The voice unveils a grand narrative about the origins of the universe, created in a garden outside time and space by two gods, the Gardener and the Winnower. The story is told in first person from the Winnower's perspective. In the garden, the Gardener and Winnower play something called the Flower Game, where the Gardener creates life, allowing it to proliferate, and the Winnower culls that which is doomed to die. The gods don't merely play the game, they're the rules that dictate which flowers live and die. After a time, the Gardener becomes vexed. They dislike that a single pattern, an attractor in the dynamics of the game, always wipes out all other life. The Winnower disagrees, calling the pattern majestic, echoing the voice of the Deep from the Books of Sorrow in both language and justification. The title of the entry describing this pattern is The Final Shape. These connections imply the Winnower from Unveiling and the Deep itself from the Books of Sorrow are the same being, a law of the universe, an idea, and a god. In Unveiling, the Gardener changes the laws of the Flower Game, inserting a new rule into the game to counter the final shape. This angers the Winnower, who thinks the final shape is beautiful, and causes a fight in the garden. The Winnower wins, but it doesn't matter, because the conflict causes the birth of the universe, as the Flower Game is remade, the board becoming time and space, and the flowers becoming the new universe's life. The Gardener and Winnower's battle for control spills into this nascent reality. They're game designers who can't agree on how their game should be played, forcing the flowers, their players, into a conflict over which vision for the game will win in the end. The Winnower states it has only one purpose and principle to enact in the game, which we can infer is using the darkness to winnow the universe into a final shape. This helps explain why the Winnower is said to be both the Deep itself and the final shape in the Books of Sorrow. It's a god manifested as one of the laws of the universe. Later, the Winnower speaks directly to its listeners, Eris Morn and the player Guardian, saying that the Gardener raised them from the dead as its final argument and attempt to beat the Winnower, implying that the Gardener is the Traveler and the Light simultaneously. The pattern that made up the final shape enters the new universe too. The Winnower says this pattern isn't guaranteed to control this universe, as they were made before light and darkness, needing to adapt to the new conditions. The implication is that this set of flowers is still out there, trying to outcompete everything else until it's the only life form in the universe. Unveiling casts the Destiny universe as born of eternal conflict between two beings who are simultaneously game developers and the rules of the game themselves. The players have been conscripted into an eternal war between light and dark, Gardener and Winnower, forced to fight other flowers for survival and to pick a side. This conflict seemingly comes to a head at the end of the Light and Darkness saga, in the expansion called The Final Shape. The Witness tries to enact its own version of the final shape by taking control of the Traveler and using it to erase all light from the universe, freezing it in an eternal stasis. This idea is referred to as both the final shape and the dark future, one where light falls and darkness controls the entire universe. However, the Guardian and their allies realize that survival can only be found in balance between light and darkness. With the consent of the Traveler, the Guardian uses light and darkness to stop the Witness, and ensures the continued existence of the universe. After the conflict ends, the Winnower reaches out to the Guardian in the lore tab of Naker, asserting that they haven't gone anywhere, implying that the war between the Gardener and Winnower hasn't concluded, despite defeating the Witness. This makes sense considering that the Witness claims to be the first knife, a weapon the Winnower uses to fight the Gardener in unveiling. This implies other knives will try to destroy the Traveler after the Witness. In fact, we've already seen Dredge and Bale try in Renegades. After the conflict with the Witness ends, a new threat arises. A prophecy of extinction triggered by the death of 3, the dark matter consciousness associated with Earth, and member of the Nine. This marks the beginning of a new story called the Fate Saga. Meanwhile, the Nine appoint the Guardian their weapon and seek to make a man named Lodi their next emissary, a vessel they can use to enact their will in the world of matter life. What would have been the start of a new saga was cut short with the announcement that Bungie is ending development of Destiny 2 after the failure of Year of Prophecy. Because the next 2 expansions, Shattered Cycle and The Alchemist, have been cancelled, the narrative changed course for the final update, Monument of Triumph, which seems like an attempt to leave the story in a less tenuous situation. Instead of extinction being imminent, due to the loss of 3 negatively affecting Earth, suddenly the Traveler returns to the surface and begins to heal the planet. The lore directly references the fact that the future has suddenly changed. Finally, a major reveal occurs in a secret cutscene that can only be unlocked by completing some of the update's triumphs. The lore entry for Impact Trajectory sets up this cutscene. In it, Shiro 4 returns from a reconnaissance mission outside Seoul, so hastily that his ship is shot down by the Vanguard. After he reawakens, Shiro has a message for the Guardian saying, "Help Suzume, it tried to take her. Tell the Guardian they have to know. It's waiting at the Shard." The identity of the being Shiro refers to is left unspecified, but apparently it's something with the power to take living beings and bend them to its will, an ability primarily used by Oryx and the Witness. Suzume is Shiro's ghost, meaning this unknown being tried to take control of a vessel of the light. Finally, Shiro tells the Guardian that this being is waiting at the Shard of the Traveler. If the player has already completed the You and Me Big Blue Triumph, when they go to the Shard of the Traveler in the EDZ, they can watch a secret cutscene, where this being speaks to them through the body of Lodi, who temporarily is overrun with taken energy while he's being possessed. The unknown voice says,
"Hello, my good chum. There's blood on our hands, isn't there? From this little spat. Even they know it. That our meeting is inevitable. The Eternal Nine. Big deal. Between you and me, who isn't? You know, the pieces they want you to knock down are already set. Ending with me. Showdown at the end of time between champions of dark and light. That's why they courted you. Impress their own importance upon you. They need your violence because I exist. But they don't get to put you on hold and walk away. Drag those 8 egos back in. Do what you do best. Impose your will. That's what a weapon's for, after all. End it on your terms. This is what you wanted, isn't it? In your heart of hearts. Don't worry. When it's over, I won't abandon you. Take a breather. Take your libations. Let that vigor seep back into your bones. Get hungry.
The cutscene occurring at the Shard of the Traveler, the place where the Guardian regains their light after it's suppressed during the Red War, and the attempt to take a ghost, implies that this being is seeking to take the power of the light for themselves, perhaps to counter the Guardian wielding light and darkness. This speaker is almost certainly the Winnower. The chummy tone matches the lore entries we've seen it speak to the Guardian and Oryx in, and a showdown at the end of time could only mean the final shape, the ultimate battle between the Gardener and the Winnower. It specifically says the fight will be between champions of dark and light, which leads me to believe that this showdown won't be the Winnower and Gardener fighting directly. Rather, 2 of their pawns who have proven their right to exist over all others will do the fighting and prove which entity wins the flower game once and for all. This is of course what the Winnower wants, what it has always wanted since before the Gardener changed the rules, birthing the universe. On the other hand, the Gardener doesn't want everything to be winnowed into a final shape, and has tried to prevent this outcome. However, as we saw in Unveiling, it loses because it would rather have peace, while the Winnower is willing to fight. Because the dynamics of the conflict give the Winnower an advantage, this showdown might be an inevitability, barring the intervention of another power, in this case the Nine. It's very fitting that the Winnower references the 8 egos of the Nine, omitting 3 who is dead, which displays the Winnower's ideology that anything that has died wasn't worthy of existing and is not worth considering in the first place. The Fate Saga establishes the Nine as a third party in the cosmic conflict, beings who are not paracausal themselves, but instead have the ability to negate or nurture paracausality. This allows them to counter or aid the Gardener and Winnower while serving their own agenda. In Renegades, we see their ability to negate light through eclipse energy, which is used to kill dozens of guardians and ghosts at Tharsis. Prior to Monument of Triumph, the Nine's plans were extremely unclear. However, because of the story diversion, a lore entry has the member of the Nine for the Sun, 9, speak to the Guardian and reveal their endgame. The Guardian is a weapon to kill the final shape and thus the Winnower. 9 says, "There is an idea more pervasive than any other because it is the idea that existence ends with a final victory. The parable is reality, O my best beloved. It is the truth of the universe. It is a flower game. Do you understand? There is a being we cannot kill because it is not a being but an idea. And that idea will kill us all because that idea is all that remains at the end of existence. This is why your tomb one day will be empty, because you were never fated to enter it. We needed a weapon to kill the idea, deter it from trying in the first place. We voted to see the weapon unsheathed and propel you forward, to face the idea and its chosen, just like it wants, just like we want." My theory is that this was only supposed to be revealed just before the Nine were bound into their vessels to avert the prophecy of extinction, and would have served as either the endgame of the Fate saga or the beginning of a new one. However, that's by no means confirmed. The Guardian is a weapon meant to kill an idea by facing the idea and its chosen champion at the end of time. This is the showdown that the Winnower talks about. If the final shape remains a law of the universe, every living being within it is doomed to die. And the Nine don't want that, so they elect the Guardian their weapon to destroy the final shape. We even have an idea of who the Winnower's champion will be. In Unveiling, the Gardener is said to become vexed by the final shape, which hints that the Vex might be born of the original final shape. The passage describing the final shape entering the universe also parallels what we know about the origins of the Vex. Oryx also deems them a worthy opponent in the Books of Sorrow, and mentions cellular automata in this context, which the Flower game as described in Unveiling is based off of. Another Monument of Triumph lore entry seemingly confirms this idea. 4 of the 9 says, "Once upon a time there was a game. Etched angles branch into fan-headed frames. A sea of red dots fixes on you. Above, dark matter intelligences press against the glass, helpless to interfere. The pawns chosen are familiar to you. Eons rush by. The manufactories spread. There are gears and pistons and motors and clamps and actuators and shafts and bearings and rivets, and parts for which you know neither name nor purpose. They were set in motion by a will we cannot contest. Future is past is Vex. Yet we must try. The game will not remain within the bounding board. The Vex turn inward outward. A snippet of code calls itself, becoming by virtue of being, flooding the layers of reality. The dark matter intelligences may reach them only after they have become inevitable. All fall before them subsumed until there is nothing left that is not Vex. A universal end state, a decisive victory. The Vex's nature has always been to try and subsume all other forms of life into themselves, converting every planet they visit and every being they come into contact with into Vex. This is a perfect reflection of the final shape, a species who cannot tolerate the existence of other life forms, and endlessly seeks to outcompete them at any cost. They also have historically been unable to wield paracausal power, matching the Winnower's description of the final shape being created before light and darkness. The will the Nine cannot contest is obviously the Winnower, which would imply that the final showdown at the end of the universe would be between the Guardian and the Vex. The Vex couldn't win that fight in their original form because they don't have paracausal powers to contest the Guardian with. However, the Vex have been evolving recently under the influence of the Conductor's paracausal echo of command. Some have gained individuality, like the Tharsis Reformation, leading them to seek a different path than their relatives. I believe this could eventually cause them to evolve into a form capable of defeating the Guardian once and for all, surviving the influence of other actors. I doubt the Conductor would have done this herself, as her grasp over the Vex was already slipping an edge of fate, but I could see a scenario where her actions merely begin a process that ends with the Vex developing into a far more virulent and deadly form. What form that actually is, I don't know, but several disparate characters seem to be trying to influence the Vex towards their own ends. I'm not going to discuss them fully here as I want to stay focused on the Winnower and final shape, but the Nine, the Hive Pantheon, and Teox are interested parties. There's a wrinkle in the Nine's plan, which is that killing an idea is very difficult, verging on impossible, and the final shape is a self-healing ideology. Think about it. In my opinion, if we face the Winnower directly and try to kill it, there are two main outcomes. Outcome 1. The Winnower kills the Guardian. We fail and all life in the universe except the Winnower's champion dies. The final shape dominates the Flower game. The Gardener loses and the universe is subsumed in darkness. No new life can be born. This is the dark future. Outcome 2. The Guardian kills the Winnower. However, by killing the Winnower, they have proven the final shape correct. The Winnower still wins, because you can't destroy the idea that you must kill your enemies to survive by killing your enemies to survive. That's enacting the very ideology we're trying to kill. It's unclear exactly what happens at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Winnower is conjured back into existence, because its ideology reigns supreme and dominates the flower game anyways. It literally is the final shape, which means if the idea of the final shape still exists, the Winnower might still exist. I see this as similar to Oryx conjuring his sisters back into existence after killing them in their throne worlds during the Books of Sorrow. Being conjured back into existence with its own death would make the Winnower a hypocrite though, which would be ironically hilarious. This means that killing the Winnower directly likely wouldn't work, requiring us to seek more creative options. It reminds me a lot of past conflicts with Xivu Arath. Because she's a god of war, she gains power from fighting her enemies. This means beating her in a direct fight is almost impossible. This is why in Season of the Witch, rather than killing her directly, Eris slays Savathun using Hive sword logic to gain more power than Xivu Arath, in order to cut her off from the Black Terrace, Xivu's throne world. The indirect approach works the best, because fighting Xivu directly only strengthens her. Returning to the Winnower, the first idea that comes to mind is instead of killing the Winnower, we use the Nine's eclipse energy to negate the darkness. This outcome is called the Light Future and is what many Lightbearers sought to achieve in the early history following the collapse. However, this fell out of favor because people eventually realized the darkness wouldn't corrupt them by using it, and instead it was a tool that could be used to defeat humanity's enemies, like the Witness. The Winnower mentions the light future in Unveiling, saying, "But imagine the abomination of a world where nothing can end, and no choice can be preferred to any other. Imagine the things that would suffer and never die. Imagine the lies that would flourish without context or corrective. Imagine a world without me." Without the Winnower and the darkness, no flowers could be winnowed by death, meaning that any being trapped in situations that would normally be fatal would be condemned to an eternity of suffering, endless pain without the release of death. Additionally, as the universe decayed, dwindling resources would need to be allocated to an ever-increasing population, condemning all life to suffer from starvation for eternity. We don't know for sure that killing the Winnower would end death, but I'm partial to the idea because that's the rule of the flower game the Winnower embodies prior to the Gardener changing the game in Unveiling. If the dark future represents extinction, the light future represents eternal torment. This is an equally undesirable future in my eyes. Instead, we need to find a way to subvert the Winnower without killing it. The lore hints this may be the direction the writers head in should Destiny's story continue after the end of Destiny 2. In another lore entry, former emissary Orin has a conversation with Lodi. She says, "My very presence here proves that the Nine are not infallible," Orin offered. "I've come to believe there's another solution out there, one they haven't considered, and we all trust you and the Guardian to find it." This implies another solution exists, perhaps one that obeys the lesson taught by the Light and Darkness saga, finding balance between the two forces. We may not need to kill the Winnower to defeat it and avert the final shape. Perhaps we could use the Nine's powers to manipulate the Winnower and prevent the final shape from arriving, allowing the universe's life a chance at freedom, continuing to exist by preventing the conflict from ever concluding. On the other hand, the Winnower might truly be unbeatable. In that situation, we could learn from the Nine and find a way to create a new universe for all remaining life to escape to in order to survive the final shape. This allows the final shape to take hold, while simultaneously preventing total extinction. Finally, a darker option would be to accept that the Winnower is right, that we can't outrun death and must embrace it. This would be a bittersweet lesson, reflecting the truth that in the real world you can't outrun death. Ultimately, the Guardian would be condemned to an eternity of loneliness, only accompanied by the Winnower, sacrificing themselves to make sure nobody else has to face the final shape themselves. However, this seems unlikely to me because Destiny's story has always focused on hope as one of its major themes, so ending the narrative with the lesson that death is inevitable doesn't seem like something the series would do. I'm not sure what story Destiny has in store for us should the narrative continue in the future. However, I think each is an interesting option that says something about the real world. The worst outcome to me would be if Destiny 2 ending means this cosmic conflict forever ends on a cliffhanger, never able to reach its intended catharsis. I love this story and world, and really don't want it to end prematurely. This is the problem with stories that end unresolved. They forever leave the audience hanging, never able to find the closure of a conclusion. Unfortunately, if Bungie doesn't have the resources to make another Destiny game, this may be the end of the road. Ironically, this is very poetic given the themes of prophecy Destiny begins to grapple with in the Fate saga. It's very possible for a prophecy to never be resolved, forever being pushed back and reinterpreted in ways that keep it alive without a definitive conclusion. The writers at Bungie find themselves in the same precarious situation the characters of Destiny are in, an uncertain future, unsure of whether they will be able to continue telling this story, or if the prophecy of extinction means Destiny itself will never continue. This is a bitter pill to swallow, but unfortunately this happens sometimes. Even if Destiny dies, we can at least come together for its funeral and celebrate what the game has meant to us over the years. That's how I'm personally treating Monument of Triumph, as one last chance to find community in the game and gain closure in case Destiny truly is over. If you want to be part of that community, consider joining my Discord. We've been playing the update together to enjoy the game while it still has new things to offer. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like or letting me know what you think of my interpretation of the story in the comments. With that, thank you for watching and thank you for helping make Destiny a special game in such a trying time. Even if Destiny ends, it's been a joy to experience it together with this community.